Thank you, Bud.
Okay,
Thank you
that
so
moves
much.
us on to item 8B, receive a report, hold a discussion, and provide a recommendation regarding the proposed fiscal year 2023 to fiscal year 2027 Golf Park and Recreation Capital Improvement Program. Staff presenter tonight is Jen Basham, Parks and Recreation Director. Ms. Basham?
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. I will try to make this go as smoothly as he did, although I didn't prepare my words as well, so I'll try to make it as quick as I can. So what we're here to discuss this evening is our 2023 through 27 capital improvement plan. That includes all of our parks, our golf course, the Brick, and Russell Farm. What you see before you here is what was approved last November. So this is what it was approved through our budget process. As I break down the years as we move forward, there's been quite a few changes as we've reprioritized and restructured and looked at our available funding to make sure that we're balancing our projects. So just a reminder, we talked about this last year when we discussed Parks and Recreation was our key considerations. We have several projects currently going. Village Creek Trail, Splash Pad, the dog park that recently opened, Prairie Timbers is wrapping up. We're starting the design for Shannon Creek. Our soccer signage was completed. Clark Park was completed, and so was Warren Park. Our proposed CIP does combine all of those categories that I just said, and this does focus on the construction of new improvements and the enhancement of our existing assets. We also do some funding for necessary for minor unplanned improvements. So if we get a residential request, such as the unplanned disc golf expansion or new trees in a park or the conceptual design of something such as Chisenhall, we do allocate some dollars annually for those projects as they come up. And then all of these projects keep in mind with the recommendations from our 2019 master plan. So the reminder of what our master plan's goals were, there's 6 main goals. One was to maintain our excellent level of service, which the survey said we're doing that so far. Improve our walkability and park access, develop community parks, address our aging parks, develop our trail system, and then goal 6, which is what we're doing this evening, is develop and maintain our CIP. How do we prioritize all of these projects? Because we have so many. They were identified as a high priority by our citizens in the Parks Master Plan. Since then, we've had additional feedback through our annual customer satisfaction survey, and then of course we do public engagement for every project that we're working on. So if it's identified as a high priority then we balance that with our existing master plan. And then the third way that we look at that is it's reviewed and analyzed by staff to be in need of repair or replacement. So anything that is aging out of our system that we're starting to notice we're making a lot more repairs on, that we know that if we need to make a repair, that piece no longer exists, and so we would have to retrofit a new piece into it. We look at that as we balance our project list. Now, how do we pay for these? The first way that we pay for these is our 4B sales tax, which is a tax revenue that's used both as cash and a debt service. It is dedicated to parks improvements. It is not our general fund. Our existing bond revenue, so we do have some remaining funds from previously sold bonds. We've scrubbed through a lot of those, but we do still have some existing. Our parks development and dedication fees, which are collected from new home construction, and our existing unallocated capital funds. So this is our, this shows 7 years because I wanted to show you guys this is what we've done over the last 2 years and then what we're proposing for the next 5. So I'll focus this evening on what we're looking at just for next year, but I want you guys to kind of see what we're forecasting for the next 5 years. That first section is park refurbishments. So that's all of our parks, making sure that our playgrounds are replaced on a timely fashion. So we've worked really hard the last 2 years on that, and we anticipate continuing to do that over the next 5, and then we will be on a 10-year rotation for all of our playgrounds. The next section is our sports fields, which we'll talk about in more detail in just a moment. Our trails, parking, and infrastructure, we're still working on the Chisenhall and Bailey Lake and then Village Creek trails. And the next section is new, so that's our signage. So one of the things that we noticed is our park monument signs. Some of our parks don't have signs at all, so you would drive up to it and not know it was a city park. And then some are just looking at replacement. So we're looking at doing 4 a year for the next 5 years. The citywide monument signs are gateway or entry portal signs. And then for new construction, we have, for the upcoming year in 2023, we're looking at moving up the community park land acquisition with the relocation of Hidden Creek Park. So this is specifically what we're looking at for this year, and I'll break them down one by one. Does anybody have any questions before I get into the projects? All right, so Elk Ridge Park, as you can see, this is the actual park. It has a pavilion, a little playground. It's got some picnic tables and some little landscape beds. We're looking at $220,000 to complete this. We'll use the same project or process that we did for all of our public engagement the last 2 years. We'll ask the community what kind of playground they want. We'll pick top 3. We'll send those back out so the community can say, this is the exact one we want, and we'll bring that forward to you guys so you can see the results and authorize.
Can you tell me when Elk Ridge was completed? The pavilion looks...
We won't be making any improvements to the pavilion on this one.
like the pavilion looked newer, so I didn't know if you knew when this playground was installed.
The vast majority of our playgrounds were purchased between 2008 and 2011. So this is somewhere in that window. Elk Ridge, Cedar Ridge, and a few others were all purchased in the same year, I believe 2009, but I can verify that.
Well, I was just curious, but because that looked newer, so I was like, well, how old is this play set? But at the same time, looks like a pretty good-sized park, and then there's this sad little playscape. That seems very undersized for how many houses are in this area. So is it one of those also that does not have any signage? Because I'm pretty sure I've driven past it.
It has no
and
signage.
I didn't know if it was an HOA park, and I was like, well, maybe they ran out of money when it came down to selecting that playscape, but it is a city park.
It is. It does have a park rule sign. We replaced all of those last year, so there is a park rule sign on the site now, but you wouldn't know what park you're at, or that it was technically a city park unless you looked really closely at the park rule sign. It is about half an acre of flat, non-floodplain land, so it's not very big in the usable space, which I think is why this is scaled the way that it is, because there's a lot of drainage area behind this park, specifically that we can't put a playground on, although we could enhance the footprint of this one to do a larger playscape.
Councilmember Stanford and I had the pleasure of attending the Parks Board meeting the other night, and we had a couple of speakers, and in addition, after following the meeting, a couple of the board members stayed around, and we were able to just have a casual conversation about what their interests are, what they're working on, what they're hearing, and so a couple of the comments were about accessibility. And when I'm looking at a park like this that has such a small footprint around the playscape, is this one of those that we might be able to look at removing that like little wall and the wood chips and changing the padding of maybe just keeping it all, I don't know if all concrete's necessarily the answer, but something that would be more accessible than having to climb into that round, I don't know what you call that, but like the brick,
curb.
the
Yep.
curb and wood chips to make it more, something that doesn't.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because not only were we discussing wheelchair accessibility, but also elderly accessibility, or anyone who has joint knee issues, stepping over things and into wood chips, or just wondering about the liability, if we could reduce some of that, and maybe not necessarily focusing solely on like the ground that kind of shock absorb and everything, but just making it easier to come and go through it without the curb.
Sure. So we have 3 surfacing options for a playground because of the fall zone and risk requirements. So we can do FIBAR, which is the engineered wood fibers that you see in most of our parks. You can do pour in place, which is a rubberized surfacing, or you can do artificial turf. But we are required to use a specific type of surfacing. The parks in Burleson really liked that 10-inch mow strip around the edges, which is that curb. So within budget, depending on the final design of a playground, we have looked at putting those all at grade, which does greatly increase the accessibility of the park. But I think what we're going to try to balance as we present that again to Park Board next month is discussing which parks make the most sense to add inclusive to. Most likely those will be ones with parking adjacent so that you could drive up and access them. But it is something that we'll be thinking through as we move forward.
But the at grade alone sounds exciting.
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, All right, Oak Valley is the second park that we're looking at doing the playground replacements on. This one's a little bit more expensive because we are looking at some parking improvements for this project as well. So we'll replace the playscape that you see, the merry-go-round, what we call the miracle balls. Those are the climbing structure to the side. Miracle was really excited about those about 10 years ago, so we have those in a lot of our parks. One of the things that we could talk about is like this merry-go-round, they make a wheelchair accessible version. And so we'll look at that as we move forward and doing inclusive things. If there's a play, like a swing set or something like that, we'll look at that and we'll look at the accessibility points to that. Because you're right, if we have to roll through 5R to get to it, it doesn't serve its purpose.
And the parking, I know I mentioned this at the park board meeting, but this is a popular parking lot for trail users. So it gets taken up sometimes even before people can play on the playground. So the parking is all out on, is that Oak Valley Road Street? So there's cars all along the side because it's a little pocket hidden, and so parking's not exactly the best there.
It is definitely one of our most heavily used parks, and it's the only one on that side of town. So, Wakefield Park is our next one. Same thing as Elk Ridge. We're looking at $200,000. We'll replace this play structure, do some landscape improvements, and add our monument sign to this project. Bartlett Field Group regrading, so this is going to be a new one. You guys haven't seen this before. It's been really requested by BISA for the past few years and by all of our kids that are enrolled in the BISA program. It's the removal of all of the existing turf and irrigation, regrading the entire park, building new crowns, resizing 2 of those fields, and adding the new installation of new irrigation and turf. This is an expensive project. Unfortunately, this was not built correctly the first time it was built. So if you have been out to Bartlett Park, you will notice that the grading is very wavy on all of these fields. The crowns aren't centered into the middle of the fields. So as a soccer pitch, it should bound in the middle and crown out at a slow grade. Most of them aren't centered, they're off center if they exist at all. So we've had this request. We've identified this as a need both as staff and from BISA, so we have been able to move this project up. Chisenhall Field Turf and Lighting. This is a 4-year plan, so we're looking at upgrading just our infields with artificial turf and then upgrading the lighting to LED. Our first year, we're looking at starting with Arabian. That's our biggest field. It's the one that we can get the most utility from, so we can use portable mounds and do smaller games or larger games. We'll do this basically once a year. We'll pick our most high-use fields. We'll work our way from the biggest to the smallest use fields. And we're looking at a 6-month design process for this. This will allow us a lot more utility on these fields. They get a lot of wear and tear. And the same thing with Bartlett and Chisenhall is a field has a life on it. It can have so many games played on natural turf before that turf is just worn out. It doesn't matter how much we take care of it, how much pre-emergent we put out, how much we could do conditioner, fertilizer. You can play only so long before it's just worn out and needs to be either scraped and replaced like we're doing with Bartlett, or we do something that's a little bit more permanent. This is a continuation of a current year project, so we're on the design of these now, but you'll see the construction of this in the 23 years, so it is on here. This is 54 spaces at Bailey Lake and 100 spaces at Chisenhall Fields. The Village Creek Trail, this is kind of just like the last one. It's in design right now, but the construction of it will actually take place in 2023. So this is that addition of 1.8 miles of trail from Chisenhall to Hillside. We're at about 90% plans right now, so we anticipate bidding this probably late summer and then constructing it starting this fall. Park monument signs. So this is just an example sign. We'll actually scale it to the size of the park. So while this is a rather large sign, we're just giving an example of what it could be. We haven't done design for any of our parks yet, but over the next 4 years, what we're hoping to do is change out 4 of these a year, and then eventually they'll all be branded the same. And then community monument signs. So these are the entry portals. The only existing one that we have right now is on Alsbury and 35. I'm sure you've all seen it. It just says Burleson right as you're headed south on 35, right near the exit. So we don't have conceptual design or a cost for these yet. So we've budgeted $200,000 for 2 years. And we're working right now on some concepts just to develop what it would cost us and where we should potentially put that. And we'll bring that back to council and to park board once we know that. Shannon Creek Park, we are in the final design of that right now, and we hope to get to construction next year, but we know that this is going to be a very immersive public engagement process. So if we don't get all the way through design and start construction, we anticipate completing the design and hopefully bidding it out next year. And then community park land acquisition. So this one's gone forwards and backwards. So it was originally a 2022 project. Last year we moved it to 26 because we just weren't sure, we weren't ready to make that purchase. Now with the potential to relocate the Hidden Creek softball fields and the way that our fund balance is falling, we do have the funding available right now to move and see if we can acquire the property. If we purchase the property this year, we're still looking at 2 to 3 years of design before we break ground. So we felt like if we can get the land, let's go ahead and start that so we can start some design process on it. And then the park annex, so this is the construction of a new park annex facility. This was previously brought forward this year as an addition to our CIP. We've received the probable cost for this. Unfortunately, construction costs are so inflated right now, it is above what we originally projected. But we are funding this through multiple avenues. So we've got some general fund dollars, Chesapeake settlement, the sale of multiple properties, and then the remainder will come from 4B. And then, of course, every year we're putting in that $50,000 just for unplanned park improvements. Any questions on parks before we move to the brick?
Anybody?
All righty. So for the brick, in former years, all we had in this, the brick was not really looked at as doing capital improvements to, because it was a new facility. Now we're at 12 years old, and so we're starting to see some items that we just need to start taking care of. So for the 23 year, what was already in there as of last year, but we're keeping in there, is the upgrading to our AC control system and the ventilation. So this will be what controls all of the different rooms' temperatures, as well as redistributing the ventilation so that our rooms circulate properly. We have some issues right now keeping, even just between meeting room A and meeting room B, they don't stay the same temperature. One can be super hot and one can be cold. So by upgrading both of these systems, one, we're hoping to get more utility from our existing HVAC system, and two, hoping to keep our air better distributed throughout the facility. The second is the retiling of the pool party room, and then of course the fourth is the remodel of the entryway, and I'll break these down real quick for you guys. So I don't have they didn't let me climb on the roof to get you guys cool pictures of the HVAC system, but this is the aerial view of it. And we're looking at this being a $500,000 project, and it'll take us about 9 months once we have someone come in and do the final analysis of what that will take to redistribute all that air and do the install that new system. The second is the retiling of the party rental rooms and the family changing rooms. So this is our tile. It is original. This is one of our major revenue makers within the facility, and so it is starting to look pretty dated in there. It's also, this is after a power washing is what it looks like, so it's just had a lot of use, and it's time for this to get completed. This is the entryway improvements. So this is the complete redesign of our entryway. So one of the big challenges we have right now is our staff is tucked back where it says administrative desk. So they have no sight lines into our gym, into our kid zone, into our aquatics facility, into the stairs, into the locker rooms. We have our big boulder that is not very highly utilized, that creates sightline issues throughout the entire entryway. And then of course we have the point of sale desk, which you probably don't know what that's called, but it's this, which was originally designed to be more of an aquatic entry area desk. We don't utilize it now, and we feel like it's a better way to program the space. So we will redesign this entire entryway with the removal of that boulder and installation of some type of new play feature, and then of course creating a new circulation desk where people can circulate and have great sight lines throughout the facility. And when you walk in, you'll actually know where to go because they won't be tucked away in the corner. Oh, I went backwards. All right, now on to golf. Any questions on the brick? Okay. So golf, last year was our first year to add golf as a CIP, and so we added the irrigation pump replacement and that pump house. That's underway right now. We're just waiting for the pump to finally come in. The outside of those facilities are actually they're slated to be painted this week pending weather, and that roof will be replaced once we actually get the pumps put in. the monument sign that's out on 35, and then T and wayfinding signage. But one of the big issues when James, our new golf GM, came in last March was our bunkers are all in need of replacement. So we're doing a 5-year plan to replace those. We're working on doing a lot of tree removal and limb up, and you'll see the different years that we plan on doing different areas. We did a lot this year. We have a lot more to go. Doing some range side improvements on hole 9, and then we are anticipating resurfacing our greens out in 2027.
I think it's hole 16 that floods.
Yes.
Are we going to do anything about that?
So that's part of the bunkers and the drainage. They did a lot of drainage improvements this year to that area, and they'll continue to address that in the upcoming year.
Okay.
But it's a big project.
Okay.
So this is our existing monument sign that you see at the top, and then at the bottom is just an example. It's the same one that we use for the park monument signs. And this project is contingent upon the site not being redeveloped. So if at some point we determine what that site's going to become, we will not spend $30,000 to replace a sign where the facility won't permanently be. But for now, we know we need to replace it, so it is in our CIP. And then the bunkers that are slated for this year are 1, 16, 17, and 18, and this is actually hole 18. So this is the total. This is 23 through 27. The CIP was presented to Park Board last Thursday. They did offer unanimous support as we presented it. They definitely had some great feedback as far as additional items for future years or how we do final design for community park, et cetera. This does not include the actual construction of a community park because we don't know how big that will be or what it will entail yet. It just shows the land acquisition. And then Martin will talk to you about how we're going to pay for all of it here in just a second. All right.
Anybody? Sounded like you did good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jen.